So today I wanted to talk about something that I've discovered quite a bit over the couple of years that I've been investing. I've been looking at pitches and speaking to a lot of founders, and there's something unique that I've seen time and time across all of these pitches, but there's also the absence of it. And I want to talk about what that is today because I think it's going to help a lot of founders think about raising money, thinking about building a company, how to become successful, and how to minimize their risks of failure. So I want to talk about a quote that Peter Thiel once said in his book 0 to 1, and he quotes, "Most businesses get zero distribution channels to work. Poor sales rather than bad product is the most common cause of failure." I want to double click on this. I think there's something here. I really think that if founders can really understand what distribution is all about, I think they're going to set themselves up for success in the long term. Let's get started. Let's talk about the problem with the generic bunch of pitches that come in today, right? If you're an investor or if you're a founder, you probably have come around a lot of pitches as examples, as samples, that looking for inspiration to draw your own pitch is really about how do you craft a great pitch. And for the most part, 90% of them are okay. 10% are really, really good. And I want to talk about that 10%. After assessing thousands of decks, I've seen a common theme across most pitches, and a lot of it talks about the product, right? But the product is great, but it's not the end all and be all of everything. A great product isn't enough anymore, period. I think that's the bottom line, especially if you're building a SaaS company, especially if you're building something technology driven. There is going to be a lot of competition out there. And so again, you'll see in pitches, you'll see the quadrant, the famous quadrant, the 4 quadrants where you'll find the other competitors in the first 3, and then the top right corner usually is where you stand out, right? But as Peter Thiel said, again, competition is for losers. So with all of this happening, how do you actually stand out as a founder? How do you stand out as a company, right? But the problem is that there's not a lot of folks who talk about distribution at scale in their decks. I haven't seen it a lot. I've seen it a few times, and those are the ones that typically do really, really well because they've analyzed their customers, they've analyzed their distribution channels, and they've nailed it. And I really want to double click on this today because I think it's super, super important. So let's talk about distribution, right? Distribution is really the bridge between the product and the customers. That's the bottom line. I think that's really the key here. If you're able to find a way to bridge the gap between your product and the customers, that's where you've really going to get success. And I think most startups fail because they just can't or don't want to figure out distribution. They talk about the product, but they just don't figure out, okay, how am I going to get the product in the hands of as many customers as possible, as many testers as possible? That's the real key here, because through that, you're going to get a lot of feedback and then hopefully iterate the product and get better and better as well. So let's talk about why distribution matters so much in 2024 and beyond as well. So as we all know, I think Gen AI has definitely disrupted the game. We're seeing a lot of that right now. And for what we're doing and what you guys are doing out there, building technology companies and just businesses in general, I think there's a lot of at stake right now because Gen AI has really commoditized the building process. It's much easier now with the help of Cursor, Replit, and all of these other tools to help you build software companies overnight. And this commoditization is making things more competitive in the space. So you might think about all the existing companies out there like Adobe or Microsoft or Oracle, right? But the thing is that these aren't slow-moving companies anymore. They're moving incredibly fast thanks to Gen AI, but also based on the competitive pressures as well. They know how to iterate fast, and gone are the days where Microsoft and Adobe are very slow-moving. Now you're seeing a lot of focus put on existing startups competing with the incumbents in the space. And everyone's just moving super, super quickly right now. And I think there's something to be said about why distribution is key, because even if there is competition, if you can stand out, if you can take your product to your customer and be one of those first companies that put the product in the hands of the customer, that's really key, because that puts you at the edge of the competition. And that allows you to stand out even more. And that's, again, why distribution is so important. When you're talking about investing, especially when you're raising money, what really matters to investors is a great product, but also great distribution, as we spoke about. It's how will you acquire customers that scale? Most founders fail because they just don't mention distribution in their pitches because they haven't thought about it. If you think about the product all the time, that's great. You're solving a problem. But if the world doesn't know about your product, then there's no way for them to test it. There's no way for them to use it and give you that vital feedback that you actually need. And so I think today's world, being a founder isn't really about building a great product. It's really about mastering distribution, mastering being able to get the customers in front of the product as quickly as possible. And so if you are a founder out there, I really think about how would you pitch an investor, or how would you build a product super fast and just get it out there as quickly as possible, because those are the times where customers are going to give you the most valuable feedback. They're going to give you the advice that you need to make your product better. There are two key components of great distribution. There's the channels and there's the messaging. So the channels is your social media, your paid ads, your partnerships, your referrals, and all that jazz, right? But there's also something unique called product-led acquisition, or PLA. And companies like Notion, Slack, Airbnb do this really, really well. If you take a closer look at how Slack creates network effects, that's the idea of spreading their product to as many people as possible, you start to see that Slack creates invitations. So if you're using Slack and you want to invite someone else coming into the group, they have to join Slack as well. So same thing happens with Notion. If someone shares with you their Notion page, you'll see that you can access it, but you can't really edit it or use it. The only way is that if you have a Notion account yourself. Same thing with Airbnb, and they did it on a larger scale with people where they decided to go out and go into Craigslist, which was already thriving, and they basically took whatever happened on Craigslist and then cross-promoted that on Airbnb as well. And that allowed them to this sort of virality where people would be able to come in and sort of learn about the product and then share it with other people as well. And then the second thing about that is messaging. And it's really key here because messaging is really, really important. You have to tell a great story. Like I said, great product is great. Great distribution is even better. But if you can combine messaging with distribution and with product as well, you've got a trifecta of goodness there, because you're saying to the world and to the customer, hey, I've got a product. This is the reason I've got a great product, because of the backstory behind it. And telling a really empathetic story and why this matters to you and the mission of the company and to you as the founder is really key in driving that growth home. So what can founders do to really get started to think about this, especially if you're early stage and you want to get started? There are a couple ways we can do this. So first and foremost, think about building a distribution strategy. I think that's really key. The second thing is PLA, right? If you can find a way to sell and cross-promote your product through your own network, that's even better. Find ways and find techniques that allow your product to be scaled and leveraged without you having to do any work. If your network and your customers can spread the word without you lifting a finger, that's a perfect example of PLA. So find ways to embed PLA in your product as much as possible. The third thing, as we talked about, is narrative. Compelling storytelling works. And I think for the most part, if you're able to build a pitch deck, build a product that says to the world, I've got something great here and I really want to show it off, then that's going to set you up for success. And it shows you that it's also the roadmap for growth at the end of the day. And just keep asking yourself, how will you scale to customers faster than anyone else? I think when you are raising money, investors want to know that. They want to know that what is your strategic plan to get your product in front of as many customers as possible, and how do you scale beyond that? So with that, I think this really helps. I know that founders right now are not sometimes great marketers. They're great engineers, they're great product managers, they're great finance people. But if you can find a way to market yourself, to build strategic, really effective distribution channels to get your product out in front of as many people and eyeballs as possible, that's huge. And what I do is I look for that. I want to make sure that we have a great product, we have great distribution, and finally, we have a great story to tell. So if you like that, subscribe, share with your friends, and I'll see you in the next video. All right, bye.